The Power and the Glory, Part 3. This story is by Netrunner and comes from erowid.org, a site dedicated to drug harm reduction and trip experiences. This story is part of a 4-part series. Stay tuned for our upcoming videos. If you want to explore some of these stories yourself, we will have the website linked in the description below. Please like and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us to grow and to share these real-life trippy experiences with more people. Part 3 of 4. The next evening, I got back on the horse and smoked some crystalline DMT for the first time. I'd heard 5-MeO-DMT referred to as the power and DMT as the glory. That is exactly how my experiences fit with these two. My intent with this experience was to understand my experience of the night before. There was a group of 6 of us, plus the supplier with the pipe. We were in one of our rooms on the beds. I was the second to last to try it. All of the others had experiences lasting 10 to 15 minutes max. I inhaled 3 or 4 strong puffs, laid back, and fell through the bed. It came on very fast, very strong, and extremely visual. The most visual of anything I've done. Eyes open or shut, and completely unlike 5-MeO, which was barely visual, and strangely, only with open eyes. It was out of body. My body felt disconnected, as the night before. Somewhat tingly this time, like when a limb falls asleep. Direction, orientation, gravity, etc. became meaningless in this completely abstract work of visual art. I found myself lying down in a room, surrounded by alien presences, standing all around me in my peripheral vision. The presences appeared to me as alternating black and white outlines, and I could only see their heads peering down at me. They were featureless, except for color and shape. A black head shape, next to a white head shape, next to a black head shape. 6 to 10 of them, very interested in me, but trying to stay out of my field of vision. In retrospect, I felt like I was lying on a hospital bed as a patient of these presences. Straight in front of me, or above me in the distance, was a rectangular box, slowly approaching. It was my reaction to the box the presences were most interested in. As I studied the box, I started to make out details. I was looking into the open side of the box, and along the top edge were about a dozen or more dancing snakes, weaving rhythmically back and forth, like seagrass rippling under the sea, and pulsing in rainbow psychedelic colors, mostly reds. It was absolutely hypnotic to watch, as they slowly approached with the open box below them. Slowly, my attention moved from the snakes to the contents of the box. On the left was a circular disc, quartered, with a black dot in each quarter, also pulsing and with rainbow colors. On the right was a round flask with a long neck, and I quickly realized this was the most important of the objects being revealed to me. As I drew my attention to it, it slowly came towards me, open end into my mouth. I could feel the flask on my lips in the physical realm, which surprised me, and suddenly and involuntarily, I began to swallow. Again and again, drinking what felt like pure energy. As I began drinking from the flask, my field of vision was drawn into the contents of the flask. I zoomed in, closer and closer, until I realized with a start that I was drinking DNA. I could make out the strands and then the double helixes, and then as a single strand loomed to fill my vision, it began to unwind, and I followed the strand simultaneously in both directions at once. Forward and backward in time, a strange but pleasant sensation. What followed was an incredible experience. I felt myself morphing into various species, all feeling very familiar. It was not so much visual as it was what it actually felt like to be in the mind and body of first a fish, then a frog, then a snake, an eagle, a lion. I was experiencing the unfolding of life itself and realizing, as I had realized the night before, and on other trips and meditations, that the story of life is not one of simple chance and contingency influenced so much by natural selection, as we observe in the greater physical realm, but rather it is directed by a simple life force of pure energy, which operates on the smallest of conscious, sentient levels, down to the very molecules, atoms, even quarks, and smaller, where matter and energy blend and are really one and the same. All of it is conscious. The entire universe is conscious and connected at every level and every size, and we are nothing more than manifestations, physical packages, containers of that pre-existing, everlasting, all-pervading consciousness. But I digress. Slowly, my field of view returned back from the contents of the flask, back out to the snakes, approaching even closer, until I realized they weren't just snakes but sharp scythes, lashing out at me, cutting at my chest, my heart, dancing ever so rhythmically, gently but necessarily, telling me to let go. Open my heart, let go, let myself feel. I opened my eyes. The room was nothing but paisley patterns and paisley people. My body was somewhat tense. I closed my eyes again. The snakes were gone. I couldn't see the presences, but I knew they were still there, watching me, protecting me. In the distance, a different presence began to approach, a large red demon-like creature with a knobby bulbous head and bulging arms and fierce but non-hostile eyes. His right arm and hand was outstretched, reaching for my head. He gently reached through my flesh, my skull, and gently palmed my mind, like a blanket wrapped around my brain. Then he faded into dozens of eyes, peering, turning, twisting, watching, which in part slowly faded into darkness. I opened my eyes and met the gaze of everyone else's eyes in the room. The feeling of the demon's palm and the presence of the protective entities didn't fade. They were meant to stay with me, and they have, even now. 30 to 40 minutes had passed, the longest that evening by far. I told my story quietly and slowly got up. I felt much relieved from my previous night's experience. The glory of DMT was ever so gentle, tender, compared to the power of 5-MeO DMT. After the experience, incidentally, I ended up having to piss again and again that night, although I had not drank more liquids than usual, other than the contents of the flask and the vision. Weird. Still processing these two DMT experiences, I had one of the most realistic, vivid dreams I have ever had in my life. Christian Rach once described these types of dreams as Kali dreams, after the Hindu goddess of mayhem and destruction. Ayahuasca night. I was one of the 9 people in the group that night, and I took only a 20 milligram dose. Here is my own version of the story. I had met a young couple earlier in the week, Jay, a Hispanic engineer from MIT, and R, his Korean girlfriend. They had been rambling on during dinner number 2 about the drug that they prized above all others, just going on and on and on about the incredible effects of this stuff, which was incredibly hard to find, called 2CB. So I listened politely for about 10 minutes of this, then took the canister out of my pocket and said in a very low, very calm voice, "How would you like to try some of your favorite drug?" Well, the details of the rest of the night are somewhat hazy, but somehow we became very good friends in a big hurry, and they pretty much adopted me for the rest of the conference. And on the next to last night, they dragged me off to a Ayahuasca session, just when I had resolved to go drug-free that night, to prepare my poor overworked serotonin receptors for the last night blowout. First, some background. Ayahuasca is any combination of an extracted MAO inhibitor, usually harmaline, derived from Syrian rue, along with a tryptamine such as DMT. So it was that I found myself in bungalow number 3 with 8 other souls that night at 10 o'clock. The session was to be run by 2 would-be curanderos, Steve and Steve. The first a social worker / social activist, the latter a sometime rock musician / sometime acid casualty. Their credentials were genuine experience of several Amazonian ayahuasca sessions, and a collection of shamanic power objects and doodads that were supposed to ward off evil karma. The other participants, the aforementioned J and R, plus T, a British pagan earth mother who hugged everyone and everything at the slightest provocation. M, a skinny long-haired sensitive new age guy. D, who looked and acted like a hippie pirate. And B, a Swiss burger type who turned out to be the rock-solid anchor that held the night together when everyone else fell apart. The ground was prepared for the sowing, the beds were taken apart, and the mattresses placed on the floor, along with rugs and sheets, to cushion all against the hard and hurtful places. Lights were turned out, and candles and incense lit. Steve and Steve brought out a sack of wondrous things: crystals, metal turnings, sculptures, dried herbs, mandalas, and an exquisite tiny monkey skull that caught my fancy later. The sacrament was passed out, and the chanting and the icaros began. That's it for today's video, guys. Don't forget to stay tuned to see what happens next. If you enjoyed this story, or if you have any requests for other crazy drug experiences, please leave a comment below and subscribe to our channel. Thanks again for sticking around till the end. See you in the next video. Stay trippy.